Welcome to the Philosopher's Compass podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Alexander Kunz, and today I have a very special guest. It's Bob Kunz, my husband. He is the chief architect at Ambarella, which is a company here in Silicon Valley, and he is a really important part of the Stoic Mom community. And you might just say an unsung hero as the dad in this community, and my husband of many, many years. This podcast episode is over 25 years in the making because when we first met, we became friends and we talked about doing a radio show together. And that was way before podcasts came along. I had radio experience from college, so it wasn't too far outside the realm of possibility, but it's taken us a while to get here. So welcome, Bob.
The Philosopher's Compass podcast. This is awesome. And honestly, just to be on a podcast with you is so much fun. Like when we first met and became friends, we'd have these, like, even before we were dating, we'd have these long conversations about, if not philosophy, just about life and where we were at and the kind of challenges that we had as young adults, like moving through the world. And I thought other people would find it really interesting, and so it's kind of fun to do this in real life. I'm kind of amazed.
It is fun. I mean, we've come a long way, but we also kind of are still back where we started, having these kinds of conversations and talking about life and the big picture. And I know you always said we'd solve all the world problems if we just, kept talking about things. So I thought that was really fun.
Yeah.
And we didn't always have time to be doing this, even though we wanted to start our own radio show. We got a little bit busy. We were doing graduate school. We got graduate degrees. And we were dating, and then we got married, and then we had two kids about 2 years apart. We built our careers. We built our lives together. So it's been a great ride, and it's not over by any means. But now we can kind of let our listeners in a little bit on some context of our lives and kind of share a little bit of our background for this conversation.
Yeah, that sounds great. Exactly. I mean, we're definitely in a transition period. It's where our kids are fully adults and going about in the world, and all of a sudden they don't need us as much anymore, except for really big problems. And so it's definitely fun and different in its own way. You know, every year has its own blessings. Every year has its own challenges, I suppose. But honestly, it's just been an amazing ride.
For sure. A ride that is nowhere, as I said, not even close to over, let's hope. Um, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how we first met. When we first met, we were both graduate students at a nearby university. And I just thought it would be interesting to share a little bit about what we saw in each other at the very beginning. um, what was it that you found interesting about me?
Well, you know what? You were great at asking questions. You you cared. I mean, that was the thing. Like I was going through some tough times at the moment, and a lot of my friends, they couldn't really care. They didn't really understand this guy that was kind of talking about emotional sort of things, and you kind of expressed that you cared and you talked about things and we explored kind of why, without going into the details, why did you feel that way that you felt. You're a great journalist. And a great way of getting insight into what are the motivations behind people and what their actions are. And so you just kind of were naturally that way. And I responded to that. And I know how to ask questions and I know how to ask follow up questions. And so we had, so those are some good times. I mean, we didn't start dating right away. I mean, I think I was in a situation where I was so done with dating and just exhausted that I was like, oh, this whole thing is not going to work out. Let me just have, meet friends and make friends. And so in that early period, we were friends. And I wanted to get a bunch of people together to make dinner over the summer because we were staying at that university to study over the summer. And so I got a bunch of people together, about 12 of our friends together. And I said, all right, we're going to make dinner for each other on hump day on Wednesday. And I'll cook. I was not a very good cook. I think my skills have improved over time. But I said, all right, everybody come over to my house and I'm going to cook and then we'll just rotate. 'Cause I loved this idea because then that meant that I didn't have to bear all the responsibility. I only had to cook once over the entire summer. But the funny thing that happened is that the first Wednesday we had 12 people, and then 11 people, and then 10 people, and finally at the end of the summer it's just you and I making dinner for each other. So that was
Right.
yeah. And
Yeah, it
we would
kinda worked
talk.
out that way, yeah, and we
Yeah.
had great conversations and just connected about a lot of things. I do think I saw something similar in you where you just cared and you were just interested in me and other people as human beings and sort of that human side, that kinda humanism and wanting to kinda be there for other people, which was pretty rare among the people I was meeting.
It can be very intense, I have to say sometimes, and it can be overwhelming. Not everybody can take it. "Oh, you mean you actually care about what I think? Well, that means I have to say something of interest." That's actually my greatest anxiety about this podcast. I don't know whether I'm gonna have anything interesting to say. So maybe it's just a half an hour of boring. So, no, I have something very interesting to say.
You do. You have a lot of interesting things to say, and in fact, that is really, I think, one of the things that interested me about you from when I first met you. Is like you had interesting things to say because you actually thought about things deeply, and you were not afraid to express things. You were someone who had opinions, had his own thoughts, wasn't simply a conformist or just trying to fit in. You were unafraid to have your own opinions and to have your own grow your own character, and you really cared about that. And that was way before I found Stoicism, but I found it really appealing. And I think it's very in line with the way I think about the world. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about, you being a father and what, kind of the parenting side of things, even though this is the philosopher's compass, we also do talk about topics that relate
Sure.
to my other work on parenting.
Mhm.
And I wondered if you could share about, before we had kids, had you spent time thinking about what it would be like to be a father, like your philosophy that you would bring as a parent?
I spent a lot of time thinking about being a father even when I was younger, like a teenager, even like a young teenager. That was something that was really important to me and something that I wasn't even sure was really gonna happen. And I don't know why I felt that way, but it was something that was so important to me that one of those goals that I wanted in life. And one thing about me is I'm very long-term oriented, long-term focus. Like I can set a lot of long-term goals and I'm willing to suffer for those long-term goals. So, getting a education, advancing in my career. Unfortunately, when it comes, one thing I learned is that looking at kids and is not something like a long term goal. I mean, it is in a very abstract sort of sense, but you can't approach kind of being a father, being a parent as the same kind of long term goal because there's just so many variables. And I mean, you have to meet somebody you love, who can share the journey with you. That's a really important part, but that part took me a long time to figure out until you and I met. I had a young sister. I have two sisters, two younger sisters. And the older of the two, I'm the oldest. The older of the two, she and I were very close growing up. And then when I was in about second or third grade, my mom became pregnant with my second sister, and seeing her grow up was, amazing. You I got my parents were, professionals and in their own right. My mom stayed home with us most of the time, but she was also looking at becoming an interior designer, and, so we got this firsthand look at what it was like to see this baby grow up and go through all the steps of walking for the first time and growing hair and getting bigger. And the amazing thing about it was the potential, especially when this baby is coming along. You have no idea what this person could become. Like, what are they going to be when they grow up? What are they going to sound like? What their personality going to be like? And at the beginning, it's like a blank slate that you can almost project anything onto it, all of your hopes and dreams. So that idea and that kind of potential of being a father was something that was very important to me as one of my life goals and something that I really wanted. Especially, you'd meet people that were kind of jerks, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, sometimes why does that happen? Some people are naturally jerks, but a lot of times, without really proper parenting and guiding behavior, they won't really turn out to really functional adults or important leaders, and we really need more of that. So there's also this sort of like ethical sense of the world needs like good parents, and the world needs kids that have good parents and good values. There's many paths to being effective. There's many paths to being smart and intelligent in the world, and it's not like it requires a parent. There's a lot of different paths, but of course, you want to do the best you can to help set up people for success, and that was something that was of great value to me, and was really exciting when we had kids of our own. Um, and even then, you just see babies and they're like so much fun. Like I love that little reflex they have in their hand when like you put your finger in their hand and they just grab onto it. I mean, that's like amazing as an engineer. That's amazing engineering because you're sitting there in the middle of the trees and they got to grab onto some vines. I mean, then it fades once they actually have some dexterity and have some ability to control their own muscles. Human body's amazing system, and to sort of see it grow up like that, I had a real appreciation for as an engineer as well. So
Yeah, you're an engineer. I mentioned you're a chief architect, but that's computer architecture, not architecting a building. You're architecting computer chips and the brains of
exactly.
computers, right?
Hmm.
But you've also called yourself poker dad sometimes with our kids. And I know you enjoy playing poker and chess and other games, but I was curious if you could share a little bit about what you mean when you say poker dad.
Yeah. So one of the most important things in life, I think, and especially that dads are very good at teaching, is taking risk. And in order to get ahead in life, you have to take some risk. And what that means is that sometimes things work out great, right? You win the tournament or you win the game or you're able to go on to the next phase in terms of your career. Maybe you make a great investment. But sometimes in life, you know what? You do the best thing that you could at the time in every particular sort of situation. But there's never like 100% certainty. Even if you make some bet or that's 80%, maybe that works. It doesn't work out 20% of the time. Does that mean that somehow you made some massive mistake and you are personally at fault for those type of things? No, you made a very good bet. It just didn't work out. And this kind of resilience to the fact that you may fail or you may fall. You might ride a bike and you may fall off and you may skin your knee, or you may try to reach out and have a friend, make a friend with somebody you think is really interesting, but maybe for whatever reason they don't that doesn't work out. Maybe there's something going on in their life and you may think that that relationship is really important. It doesn't work out. There has to be some resilience to failure. And the great thing about making bets that are positive is that the more time you make them, okay, yeah, each individual bet doesn't matter that much because, okay, yeah, you failed, you fell off the bike, but now all of a sudden you can bike up the mountain. Oh, you know what? You completely spilled out on the ski slopes. Well, eventually your body remembers, and then maybe you do it right next time, and you all of a sudden learn how to ski. I still haven't quite mastered how to become a great poker player. I'm still working on it, but I mean, just this idea that you need to take risks, and I think that's like traditional like roles of fathers, at least sort of in society and so on, is that oh well they kind of go out and make them do some dangerous stuff and don't really care about whether they get hurt. It's not that I didn't care. Sometimes, honestly, I made some mistakes that kind of hurt our kids. In the sense that I pushed them a little too far to do something that they weren't really prepared to do, and it kind of blew up in my face. In the grand scheme of things, it worked out. They turned out okay. But that's this kind of idea of risk. And if I look at both of my career and my career and a lot of the professional choices that I made even before I had kids, I took some really big bets, bold bets about what I wanted to become. What kind of leader did I want to come? Where do I want to live in the United States? I mean, there's in order to get there without we could spend another 6 hours kind of talking about that. But the core aspect of all of that was just a tolerance for risk and an
Hmm.
understanding that you have to learn how to fail, pick yourself up and keep going.
Yeah, it's actually very well aligned with some Stoic thinking that I just want to share briefly here because some of our audience is interested in Stoicism. And there's this concept that you need to be able to act, but act with a reserve clause. This is something that Marcus Aurelius wrote about and talked about, where you're acting with the knowledge that what you do may not work out. It's sort of, I'm still going to do it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to do my best at it, but have to know that no matter what I do, it may not be a successful quote outcome. And I think this is one of the biggest differentiators of Stoicism from some other ways of thinking about life is that it's really not about the outcomes. It's really about what do you put of yourself into things? How do you develop your own character? How do you decide um, what you should think, what you should do, and your own motivations, your own choices, your own ability to choose well. And I think that's really a differentiator because a lot of times when you hear about parenting, it's all about the outcomes. Like, oh, how did your kids turn out? What kind of
Hmm.
jobs did they get? How much money did they make? What kind of, status do they have or whatever it is, reputation and stuff. And of course, in our society, these things are kind of nice to haves, but it's not going to determine whether or not you're a good person or whether or not you're
Hmm.
kind of a flourishing person in the Stoic
Hmm.
sense, and I think this is very related to that.
I
What do you think?
completely agree. I mean, especially we're in a pressure cooker of like Silicon Valley with sort of a self-selected of people that are very involved in technology. A lot of them have a lot of opportunity. I mean, a lot of them have some privilege if you want to put it in those kind of terms. But I think that becoming an important person and being an important person in this world, that success, I mean, in the sort of secular world is not really the most important thing. It's not important that you have the biggest house, the biggest car, the best career, the most money. I mean, these are fundamentally not the most important values of what makes a really competent adult. I mean, I'm not saying that those things aren't nice. They certainly are, but it's not you don't have to be the smartest in order to be a competent person. And thank goodness, because a lot of dumb people. I mean, no, I shouldn't say it that way. I, I mean, like myself for saying something stupid like that. I mean, my point is that you know, like, yeah, it's there are many ways to be successful. There are many paths to being successful. There's many paths to being moral. There's many paths to
Mhm,
being just.
mhm,
And sometimes somebody that doesn't have a lot of book smart has a lot of emotional intelligence, has a lot of spiritual intelligence, knows how to say the right thing, knows how to heal wounds, knows how to help repair relationships. And that doesn't require book smarts. That requires, some human intelligence that is really important and hard and sometimes that society doesn't even value.
mhm.
And that's sort of a countercultural message. I think a lot of that comes
Yes.
from sort of my religious background as well. But I mean, I think that's a really important thing to kind of point out. And so I appreciate you bringing up, especially the relationship with Stoicism.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. I think that, there's another Stoic concept, which is, um you kind of doing the hard thing is actually better for you because it sort of tests your character, grows your ability to reach towards the virtues in the Stoic sense, and adversity is the way, and all of these things. There are hard parts about being a dad or a mom or a caregiver to kids, raising kids. So I wonder if we could talk for a moment about what's been difficult to you about being a dad.
That is a very difficult question because I think I really enjoyed being a father, still enjoy being a father. I think there's two answers that come to mind when I think about that. The first is that the most difficult thing, especially as a father, was being present and making time to be there for them, and trying to balance that with career and all the challenges that we had, especially when they were younger. Now it's a lot easier, but that was for my own part being a dad was, man, I just wish I had spent more time when I look at them going off to college. Honestly, I think that I could have spent every waking minute of my life with them and it still wouldn't be enough because they're changing and going off, and we wanted to raise independent kids and all of a sudden they become independent kids and then they don't really need as much anymore and you're like, "Oh, well, I I kind of I kind of liked that. That was fun." So, and when I taught them how to drive, like it was like the same kind of thing. Like when I was teaching them how to drive, it was great because I got to spend hours, driving around just the Bay Area with them and driving across the Golden Gate Bridge. And, they actually knew how to drive. So you could actually have some conversation and talk about what they think is important in life. And then to give them that license, bring them over and have them pass the license. And that's great. And then all of a sudden they don't need you anymore. They're off driving around everywhere. So after they get over the initial fear of, oh my goodness, I'm driving for the first time. So those are, that's an example of something where letting go, I think, is tough. I wish I had spent more time with them. But I think the hardest thing is when you, especially as an adult, have learned a lot of hard lessons and lessons that you kind of learned when you were a kid and maybe you learned the hard way. And I think every parent tries to kind of communicate these lessons to their kids about,
Yeah.
hey, you know what? I know exactly what you're feeling. No, I know you're not going to listen to me because you think that your problems are very unique to you and nobody else has had those problems before. But trust me, I had the exact same problems. And this is the way to approach it, or this is what I learned. And then have them say, oh, yeah, well, but you're old and you're dad and you don't really know what you're talking about. I'm going to do this anyway. And then see them not listen and still make the same mistake is very difficult to deal with sometimes. Like, and I think I mean, that's again, that's important. Sometimes as a parent, you gotta be able to let them take risks. You have
Yeah.
to let them fail. You have to stand back to relate to our poker dad kind of conversation is like, you have to have some confidence that they'll figure it all out, even if you know better, or at least you think you know better. Maybe you don't because in a different world, different culture, or so on.
And
So I
maybe you
think
don't know
that's an
better for
aspect of it.
them. Maybe you know better for what would have
Exactly.
worked for you, but not
Right. Right. Right.
necessarily for them. And so that's another struggle. It's like you want them to benefit from what you've learned. You want them to benefit from maybe, yeah, mistakes you've made or things you've done over the
Right.
years where you
Right.
thought, oh, I wish I'd done this way.
Hmm.
But they're completely different people. Each one of them is a unique individual, which makes this part really hard. We
I think that part of it also is just patience. Like having patience is very
Mhm.
difficult, especially for me. I don't know. I'm not very patient. So sometimes you teach them something and then this is like math and science. Like it was really important, especially as daughters. Like I wanted them to feel that I didn't really want them to feel that there was anything they did not have any disadvantage when it comes to approaching sort of math and science. That was one of my important, objectives as a father is to kind of give them that kind of background and show them that math and science could be sort of really interesting and fun in its own way. Not that they had to go and follow some sort of STEM path, but I just wanted to have them some appreciation that this is doable, especially it's doable for girls. And so when they were growing up in the initial math, what I would do is take them aside and say, "Hey, look, I know this is really boring because you're doing this very repetitive sort of task. But trust me, this is really interesting. And I'm going to tell you why this is really interesting. And I know this is going to go completely over your head. But just trust me, it's going to be really interesting. I'm going to give you these little seeds of nuggets and did that. And at the time, they're like, it didn't really go over very well. Why are you making me do this? But then to have that patience that, okay, this was the right decision at the time, at least I think for our kids, and every kid is different, but that it might pay off. And then to learn later in life that actually that was something that did sort of sink in, even though they're sort of complaining about it at the time. That kind of energy and that focus on them help them grow into better people and feel more comfortable with math and science kind of subjects. That was something that was really rewarding, but it required patience. And that's just one example. There's plenty of other examples that were far more frustrating and required a lot more patience. But being
Yeah.
able to live in that uncertainty and live with that feeling that it may just take time for something to work out. And there were some really serious challenges that I probably don't want to discuss here, but there were patience was very important and a necessary kind of virtue, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. Well, definitely they did feel the confidence to do math and science because now we have one of our daughters studying physics and very, very involved with quantum physics and quantum computing and devices. And then our second daughter who wants to major in math. So they clearly learned from you and also from me and my family and our history with math and so on. But I think it's really important that they developed that confidence and that idea that this can be interesting, this can be fun, and if not, useful day to day, there's a bigger picture to it. There's deeper
Right,
thinking
right.
to it instead of just, okay, let's do 100 arithmetic problems right now.
Hmm. Hmm.
What do you think that people kind of get wrong about being a dad or being a parent?
Mm, I think that, well, So that's a hard question. I mean, I think about it on the one way I look at it, I think that modern media treats dads as sort of like Homer Simpson, kind of
Right.
like the dumb guy, right? Oh yeah, he's the dumb guy. And or the butt of jokes. And look, I'm sure from your perspective, there's plenty of jokes about moms out there that exist. Sort
Yes.
of the dad joke kind of mentality is way. Look, I can tell a good dad joke. Don't get me wrong. I have no problems being sort of the having somebody poke fun of me as an adult as a dad in particular is just part of the job. It's perfectly fine. I'm not bothered by that. But that dads are somewhat secondary or sort of superfluous, and or that as I said, like a lot of that sort of affected the fact that I felt like I didn't spend enough time. I was sort of expected to sort of stay away and sort of make money for the family, and this is what my responsibility is, and the mom's responsibility to kind of take care of the kids, and a lot of emotional load is sort of carried by moms and is sort of expected to be carried by moms, and I think that that's sort of how society sort of packages dads, and I think actually that's not really good. I mean, I think having dads become part of the life, that dads roles are really important, and that having not that plenty of people don't grow up in a situation where there's a dad, and I don't mean to sort of disparage any kind of other sort of relationships that might be out there, but really honestly, in terms of being a dad, being present, teaching them about risk, teaching them about those kind of things, I think is kind of underappreciated. So having a stable dad who keeps things going and is sort of undervalued, I think, to a certain extent. And so that's probably a misconception of about dads. I mean, I think sometimes dads can. I mean, I tried to be affectionate. I tried to be giving. I don't think that tried to be emotionally available. And maybe I would say that that dads can't be that. No, you know what? You can be manly. You can be manly and share your emotions too. Maybe it's a little bit easier with daughters than it is with sons. I don't know. I just know from my own. I'm a dad daughter. What do they call that? Yeah,
A girl dad?
girl dad. Yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
girl dad. So I'm a girl dad. So I don't know what it's like other than that. So
But you also bring a lot of emotional intelligence to your parenting and your relationships, your relationship with me and your relationships, even at work. I think you bring a lot of emotional intelligence. And I think that that's sort of an undervalued aspect for men. I mean, I would say just overall, part of the reason why you see the Homer Simpsons or some of these depictions of fathers is, that they don't always bring that sensibility and that ability to connect to emotions and ability to connect to their children's character and sort of character building,
mm,
and helping them become good people as opposed to just like either there's like stereotypes about dads, either they're really strict or else they just
yeah,
don't
exactly.
care or they're absent or whatever. So it seems like what you're talking about is fighting the stereotypes too.
Exactly. And honestly, like I see it because now I have a team of my own, at my company. And look, I've had the great blessings actually to have people that work on my team that are moms and dads, and actually sometimes both. I mean, in the sense that, well, anyway. So a lot of times I'll sit down with the men and say, look, you're a dad. And I think I took like a week. I mean, my company was a startup company. They said, well, you can take a week. Well, you don't have to pay. We won't don't credit it as vacation because you're going to be working, but take a week.
Yeah,
And
which
I
is
think with
ridiculous,
modern,
obviously.
right? Yeah, I
Of a
mean,
newborn, you need to take a lot more time. Yeah,
and I know that without, we try to keep this sort of impersonal in the podcast sense, but I know also that had an impact on you. I think
yeah,
it's honest to be honest about that. So what I do, I mean, I can't go back in time and sort of change things, but what I can do is sit down with those fathers and say, look, I don't mean to overstep because honestly, we have a professional relationship, not a personal relationship, but try to send them that same message that honestly, like the work is still going to be there. Your kid is going to grow up like very fast, and so you need to take time. Just
yeah.
take time, and we'll figure out how to make the organization work. And if you need to take leave, and we'll make sure it's fair to everybody, so that the organization can continue to function. But you should spend time with your kids and be encouraged and have the freedom to do so. There's a lot of support, I think, for moms around doing that, but having some support for dads, I think, is kind of important. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the guys will say, "Look, hey, look, that's fine. I want to be there, and I want to get ahead, and I want to be ambitious, and I can't really fight against that. If somebody wants to be ambitious and get a lot of work done, what am I supposed to do? I can just all I can really do is give them the opportunity to say, "Look, I understand you're ambitious. I'm not going to get in the way of your ambition. You're going to still be successful, but just remember that it isn't all about the job." So,
Yeah,
some
yeah,
people
and these
take some
times
degree.
are limited with our kids, and there's special moments, and also I think, you as a dad have, kind of stepped up to things where some dads might not do it, but because they might not know that much about it or feel that comfortable. I was just, recalling earlier today about how you took our older daughter to go shop for a prom dress. And I mean, that's maybe not a typical dad thing to do, but I was talking with our younger daughter about, oh, she might look at a prom dress. And I'm like, well, I could take you, dad could take you, like I
Done it.
also, and by the way, I also, as a mom, it's really important to me to enable you as a father to actually be able, feel good about putting yourself in those situations where it's not like I feel I have to do every single thing. I think that's another trap people can fall into where sometimes a mom or one parent in a situation feels they have to sort of be in charge of everything or control of everything or be the primary on everything. And,
Mhm.
I still remember like asking the school, like, make sure you put Bob down as emergency contact. Like, it's not just me or like on certain things, you should be the one to go ahead and, take them on a field trip or whatever it was. So I think that's a message for all kinds of parents is like whoever else is the parent or the caregiver, give them those opportunities if they might not think of it themselves. Or in your case, you did, but I think some people might not have had that in their lives before where different parents are taking on more roles or different roles.
Yeah, the I really appreciate that. But you knew that even before our kids were born. Because if you remember, one time you were sick and I ended up going to the Lamaze class on my own.
That's right. You were like,
Like,
oh, how can we get ready for birth? Well, oh, Meredith can't be here. I'll go.
I said, "Do you want me to go? I mean, should I go?" And you're like, "Yeah, you should go." I'm
Yes,
like, "Okay."
exactly.
So
Yeah,
I'm
I thought
like,
that was awesome, and that yeah, there were many instances of that where you're very comfortable with, you don't have to do only one role. You can kind of be helping out. Granted, you couldn't actually give birth, but you could, have a lot of knowledge and have a lot of support and have a lot of like being there. Also, just being there
right, right.
sometimes is a critical piece of this. What do you think is the most fun part of being a father for you, being a parent?
Well, I mean, everything is fun about being a dad. I'll say that hey, look, it's really great about being a dad. I can't think of a downside. I mean, every kind of little tiny accomplishment that they had, there were always, as I said, oh, you always took risks, and sometimes those risks didn't work out, and it was that was a dumb thing for me to do. But there was plenty of time where, it was really incredible to see some of those risks succeed and to see them, just just have a great time and have a great life. I
Well,
mean,
I know one thing you're proud of, I think, as a dad is that you taught both of our daughters to drive stick shift, drive manual transmission cars. And that's pretty rare these days in the US. Do you want to share a little bit about why you did that and what that was like?
well, I just love driving and I love manual transmission cars. And I grew up. My dad taught me how to drive a manual transmission car, and part of the reason that I thought that was important was because you have a lot of options when in an emergency sort of situation to deal and have the car do some things that it wouldn't do otherwise because you can't control it. It's kind of ironic because I work at a company that's done research in autonomous driving. I think I've done some writing about this sort of in LinkedIn, but it's like I know too much about it to trust a lot of it because computers can do stupid things. Well, and a human who kind of understands the full context might have the ability to do things effectively. So when it came to trying to teach the kids how to drive, I was like, well, I want them to learn how to drive a manual transmission. During the pandemic, I happened to find a car that was like a Toyota Corolla, which is what I learned how to drive. There was a manual transmission car, and I bought it. Like, and or we bought it. We bought it. It
A
was not
used
just
car,
me.
yeah.
So,
Hmm.
yeah, we bought the used car. I did show it to you ahead of
Yeah.
time.
Hmm.
Uh, I want to make sure that I don't take all the credit. And it was exciting. It was like, oh, I'm going to teach them how to really drive a car. And unfortunately, manual transmission cars, at least in my mind, especially with all the technology, autonomous driving technology getting better, and automatics are a lot more competent at sort of gear shifting and stuff like that. That the I suspect this will be the last generation where I don't expect that the kids will necessarily pass on the manual transmission driving. And I mean, I can also sort of foresee that. So I sat down and said, look, I'm teaching you how to drive a manual transmission car because this is something that has a great meaning to me. And I want you to feel comfortable with driving and have the confidence to be able to do it. I think our daughter just drove somewhere in like some ski resort through so treacherous like mountain pass. And I was telling her, hey, look, I was driving with you because I taught you how to do all this complicated kind of stuff. I mean, teach them how to drive up a mountain and through sort of treacherous things when I was sitting in the passenger side, which scared me to death. But I'm like, all right, this is one of these risk sort of situations. I got to
Yes.
trust them to be able to do it. So when they're driving, I don't worry about them anymore. Anyway, so not to belabor the point, that was great fun.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think you also you make a point about trust them. And I think that is something that a lot of people often miss with parenting. I think there's a one critical component about once our kids are old enough and they reach the age of reason. And so I'm not talking about toddlers,
Sure, of
they,
course, right.
they're tiny, but they're still learning. But like kids who are older, kids who are in middle school, high school, I think there's a lot of opportunities for parents to trust them more
Mm.
once they realize that their kids are kind of maturing enough to make decisions that are solid, that are well reasoned. And I don't know, my sense is that we try to trust our kids to make quite a few decisions for themselves, that not pushing them too much in one direction or another so that they could kind of figure stuff out. And I think that that's been good for them. That is definitely aligned with my kind of stoic thinking. And well, I guess that's another question I have for you, since I am the stoic mom, even though this podcast has a wider kind of
Sure.
focus. But I know you've been exposed to stoicism quite a lot for the past 10, 11 years. And I wondered if you could share a little bit about what are your thoughts about stoicism? Like, where have you seen the value in it? Maybe, anything you liked about it or questions you still have.
Well, I think that's an excellent question. I did read your book Beyond Stoicism from front to back.
Thank you.
Um, I especially like the parts that you wrote. That I kind of have I
Thanks.
had
Yeah,
some
I wrote
insight
the
into
intros to each of the
which part of the
chapters where
books
I
you
wrote the
contributed. And
bio
of course, you
sketches.
contributed to all of it.
Yes, you
I
liked the
read the
book
whole.
Beyond Stoicism?
Oh, I loved it. 10 out of 10, like 12 out of 10, of course, right? And I
Thank you.
especially liked the parts that you wrote. And I liked the sort of story. You have this great way of telling these dramatic events of these philosophers living in that time. I learned that I'm not really a Stoic so much. I'm like more of like a Cyrenaic and an academic skeptic. I really like those Cyrenaics. I mean, this sort of pleasure thing, it sounds like pretty good,
Yeah,
pretty good to me,
hedonists.
and
They
I
were the
liked it.
original hedonists, right? So you have a
Yeah,
little bit
well,
of
I
that
mean,
in you.
like a sprinkle of hedonism, like not like the
Mhm.
whole thing, but just like a little
Right.
sprinkle of it. But anyway, you got to enjoy life. Hey, what can I say? And then academic skeptic because I really like to get. I just like to argue for the sake of arguing, which can drive certain people that I care about nuts. If I'm just arguing for the sake of arguing, I'm not going to name any names. So anyway, look, Stoicism. I think it speaks a lot to you. I think that when it comes to look, I'm a Christian. I'm not like a evangelical Christian or anything like that. Like, the Episcopal Church, we like wine. I mean, we're like junior varsity Catholic, or there's like my friend in high school would tease me about it. He's like, "You're all the sin, half the guilt." And it's a church that really welcomes a lot of open discussion, and interpretations of philosophy and ethics, and that has a lot of meaning to me. So to borrow a computer term, I mean, that was kind of the operating system that I have. It's hard for me to kind of look at. I think a lot of it is probably there's a lot of cross pollination there between the Greek philosophers. I mean, a lot of the Gospels themselves are written in Greek or Aramaic or something. I'm not a biblical scholar either, so if I'm getting that wrong, please don't get me in trouble. But I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of cross pollination and a lot of common ideas. I mean, these Stoicism and Greek philosophy and Roman philosophy. I mean, these are really the bedrocks of like Western civilization, and everybody who's been thinking about this, and certainly Christianity has been a very dominant part of our culture over this period of time, but have leveraged and referenced and used this philosophy as part of it. So I think it's very important, and I think it's great. Um, there's a lot of common elements there that everybody can find some meaning in, and that's really the important thing. I think the important thing is and I think this is really sort of specified quite a bit in your book, is sort of constructing your own philosophy. I mean, everybody has their own kind of viewpoint, their own view, something that speaks to them about sort of greater truth. I believe in greater truth. I believe in something that is greater than ourselves. And I think that the key thing is trying to access that. And there's many paths to do it. And I think that's wonderful that Stoicism is a path that really sort of speaks to you. So I don't know if
Yeah.
I answered your question, but I'm going to
Yeah, yeah.
respond with a question. So
Oh, okay.
so you tell me. So like when we met, like Stoicism wasn't really on the radar, and I was busy. We were all busy raising our kids, and it was very busy. And then all of a sudden, this Stoicism really kind of spoke to you. So you obviously it's inspired your wonderful blog and this great kind of podcast that you put together. So can you speak a little bit to how did you find your way to Stoicism, and what was it something that really spoke to you and got you started on this journey that you began?
That's a great question. And it's something I have thought about because it definitely didn't come from nowhere. I originally studied history and literature as an undergrad. And then in grad school, which was when we met, I was studying history. And while I studied mostly, Western European history, more kind of early modern periods, I was really fascinated by classics and classical history. And I read a lot about it. And I remember going to the university library and pulling out this book, and it was the handbook of Epictetus. And I hadn't really heard of Epictetus at the time. I'm like, that's interesting. And this was probably like the very late 90s. I was just looking
Hmm.
at this thing. And I thought, oh, this is very wise. But when our kids were small, I just realized that I had so many questions and no answers. And everything around me about raising kids was about the outcomes. Like,
Hmm.
oh, your kid has these milestones. They should learn to walk by, 12 months. And if they don't, I mean, we had one child who hadn't really been walking by 15 months. I'm like, oh, is there something wrong? Is everything okay? Everything is like you're so worried about kind of what sort of outcomes they're having as little kids and then how that's going to speak to how they're going to grow up. Are they going to be able to grow
Hmm.
up and have a good life and be flourishing, good people? And are we doing the right thing as parents or are we not? We have to make tons of choices every day as a parent. And are we how are we thinking about this? How should I think about this? And those concerns and worries around it were probably exacerbated by being here in Silicon Valley, where there's a very competitive culture around child rearing and around
Hmm. Hmm.
parents and kids. And it's really like, oh, are you keeping up with all the things your kids should be learning and doing and all their activities and all their languages and all their Russian school of math and like all kinds of things that they, could do. And that
Hmm.
some parents put their kids into to try to help them become like these superhumans. On the other hand, I always felt a very intuitive sense of wanting to connect with my kids as people
Hmm.
and wanting to really teach them and guide them, but also learn from them and figure out who they were as human beings. And I think, after kind of reading a lot about Buddhism and about wisdom traditions and looking into mindfulness, I was still kind of searching of like, well, what could really help me understand if I'm doing the right things to help my kids become good and ethical and flourishing people. And then at one point in 2015, I ended up reading my co-author's column in the New York Times, which was about how to be a Stoic, and it was by Massimo Pigliucci, who, little did I know
Mhm.
it then in 2015, would be my co-author in 2025 on Beyond Stoicism, our book that we wrote together, which in the UK is Live Like a Philosopher, which I think is also a great title because that's really what we wrote about. How do you
Mhm.
live like a philosopher? So maybe that
Right,
was
sure.
embedded somewhere within me that I wanted to live like a philosopher and I didn't really know how. And I felt kind of unmoored. And then when I found modern Stoicism, these modern interpretations of ancient Greek and Roman philosophy, I thought this is very interesting. And unlike my understanding of Buddhism, where there was a lot of aspects around giving up kind of the self, in Stoicism, there was this emphasis on sort of developing the self and your own agency and your ability to make good choices and good decisions and think things through rationally and also be a sociable pro-social person, helping the community, helping others. It all just really spoke to me, and maybe because I already was interested in the history of that period, it spoke to me even more. So I started reading modern books, and then I started reading ancient books, and then I thought about, well, wait a second, if my one of my biggest challenges is how to be the kind of mom I wanna be and have the kids grow up the way I want them to be, maybe I should apply this to my parenting, not just to kind of myself.
Mhm.
Maybe it's a way of life and a way of thinking about life. And that's how I developed Stoic Mom, which I started publishing in October 2016, long time ago. I was also at the time doing this compassion cultivation training at Stanford Medical School, which was a really fascinating set of practices. A lot of it was based on Buddhism and mindfulness, and I really loved that, but I think I was missing that intellectual piece around how do we really figure out how to be good people. So I was excited to get involved in Stoicism. And then I found there was sort of a community of people starting to get more and more involved with it. And I really liked a lot of the people too. So that's how it began.
No. Well, I mean, that really tracks. I mean, I think that community is something that's, like, very important to you. Important to me as well, but I think especially when the kids were, like, really younger, you tried to find, moms and communities that were going through tried to tune it so you found some, important kind of support network, and then, you're always a deep thinker. I've always been a deep thinker, so it didn't surprise me that you would think very honestly and openly and deeply about the importance of being a mom and how to take it forward. And I think the really tricky part of the kids about the age of reason that you mentioned is that honestly, as in the transition period when they go from like toddlers to adults, right? They go through periods where you have to kind of adjust the messages that you tell them to meet where their mind is, or maybe you can push them a little bit, like, you can kind of give them a little bit more context to kind of give them some preview about the road ahead, but not too much, so otherwise it'll just completely go over their head, and I think you're really, really good about that, so, yeah.
Oh,
So
thanks.
how yeah, how was it dealing with me? Because, of course, as we've sort of talked about, I'm not necessarily I mean, I'm, like, I have my own sort of philosophy. I mean, we've done this, I think, well together with sort of diverse viewpoints over this and sort of a lot of different things. How was it?
Well, I think the fact that you and I both share this idea that we want to be ethical people who are helping make the world a better place. It's a very much sounds like a cliche, but to be honest, if you examine all your activities and all your choices and your actions and your behaviors in that light, and you kind of add in the golden rule, like you know you treat other people how you want to be treated. I think we share that as a foundation, you and I. And I think we both felt it was very important that we communicate those kind of ethical um, guideposts to our kids. We just did it in somewhat different ways. And I do think one thing I like about Stoicism is it allows you to question everything, really. It's about like, okay, so what really is good? You have to stop and think. And thinking is hard. This is something we also talked about a lot, I think, even when we were first dating. And thinking is hard. And it's the burden of freedom, something I got really interested in in college, just the idea that, you know, if you believe that we have free will, you have to see that we have a lot of choices to make, and it's kind of a burden because it takes a lot of critical thinking and consideration and risk taking to make
Hmm.
decisions. So I think you and I actually have a fairly similar life philosophy in a lot of ways, and we also really value like encouraging our kids to try new things and getting out there and taking a, as you said, taking a risk, but a risk that's well considered, and really trying to explore new stuff and broaden your horizons so you can really live life. I do think that in addition to having different life philosophies, I would say we're both pretty opinionated, outspoken people. And so
Hmm.
we both have maybe the desire to, influence our kids and share things with them. And as you were mentioning the other day, occasionally to have the last word.
Yes, yes,
So
exactly.
that
Right.
there's a little bit of hopefully healthy competition there that our kids hear from both of us. But I think that our basic level sense of ethics and moral core is very similar, and I think that's why it works, and that's why we have a relationship that's generally a great one, and that with our kids they may have some cognitive dissonance because they have different sort of philosophies being shared with them to some extent, but they also get that humans are different from each other, and that's okay because, I don't think there should be one single orthodoxy in the world of how every single person behaves and thinks. That would be pretty boring. I think it's important to be able to have some degree of differences. And as I was saying before, kind of a difference around, you know, maybe we agree to disagree on some things, maybe we influence each other on other things. Maybe we have some spheres of like, here's something that I really care about, check it out. And I think all of that is good and widens our kids' horizons and our own, really. It keeps
Hmm.
us thinking, keeps us critical thinkers and able to defend our ideas and our approaches. And I like to think it works out pretty well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, the thing is that stories are so powerful. I mean, especially in your book, the stories that you wrote about these philosophers, and also in our literature. In my case, in terms of the parables and the gospels, they're really important stories about critical thinking. That essentially you have the laws, but trying to figure out the right application of the laws are require a lot of thought in the moment. And sometimes the answers are something that may not be obvious, or even sort of countercultural, or go against some of the values of the systems in which you live. These are really all very powerful stories, and we didn't really touch on Star Wars. If I had any kind of philosophy, it was probably a Star Warsian, sort of philosophy. What I love about those movies is just
Especially the
the
original trilogy, I believe.
yes, I mean, OG, forget the Disney Star Wars thing. That's a whole
Right.
separate podcast. I would
We're
love to
not
get
gonna
into
go
that
into all
community,
that
but
right now, but the original
right,
3
exactly.
movies, yes.
The original 3 movies. I mean, in particular, it's like the choices that people make. Like, I mean, when it comes to your kids and when it comes to human beings in general, there's always the nature of the idea of like nature versus nurture. And
Yeah.
I always thought that that was sort of insufficient. I mean, yes, of course, the way you're born has it creates the fact that you have no hair or your height. I wish I was a little bit taller, right? I mean, these kind of things, and then the environment that you grow up certainly has some sort of influence, but ultimately it's your choices, and those choices actually define you and make you who you are, and influence you kind of going forward. And there's a lot of metaphors and stories kind of around that, but I think that's an important part. I think that's something we mostly agree on. So to a certain extent, parenting is really trying to set up your kids to make the right choices, and the right choices for them, which requires deep thought, and which rules to follow and which rules to break, which risks to take, which ones to not. So that's, I think, where we see a lot in common, and why we get along so well.
I think that's
Oh,
right.
so what is next? Okay, we're doing this podcast. You're doing this podcast. The Philosopher's Compass, really exciting. I've watched some of the podcasts myself and enjoyed listening to you talk with other folks, and so I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you in this format. It's a lot of fun. But you tell me, what are you going to do next? This is I get to sort of cheerlead on the side, so I want to know what's the next game.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for asking that. Well, I plan to continue writing the Stoic Mom blog. That's something I've been doing for over 10 years now, which is really, really hard to
That's amazing.
believe. Yeah. And I plan to continue to do it because I'm really committed to applying ancient Stoicism to modern life, applying ancient ideas from these Stoic philosophers from thousands of years ago to our lives today, which I think has been incredibly enriching to me and I think for my family. And I try to share it with my friends and frankly anyone who will listen, as well as the people who read my stuff, which has been very exciting for me to have an audience of people interested in the Stoic Mom. And I'm working on a book length version of the Stoic Mom, a book length project about this combination of Stoicism and parenting and caregiving. And so I have started writing that, and it will be about how to apply ancient wisdom to becoming a better parent today and preparing your kids for tomorrow. Because there's a lot happening in our world. There's a lot of chaos out there. There's a lot of questions out there. And our kids are really going to benefit if we can help them become critical thinkers who are self motivated to become flourishing humans. No matter what happens in the world, those are the things that are going to help our kids thrive. So I'm very excited to be working on this project and kind to distill some of the wisdom I have learned from Stoicism and from just being out there practicing as a mom. Now that my kids have pretty much grown up, hard to believe, but our kids
I
are
know.
they're becoming young adults. And so I really want to write for that next generation of kids and those moms and dads and caregivers and grandparents and so on who are trying to raise their kids now and dealing with the even increased chaos that we're seeing, and increased pressures on parents and caregivers. So I'm really excited about sharing that with more people in a book.
Well, I can't wait to read it. I mean, your first one was awesome, and
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll have some great stories. Look forward to seeing the stories. Maybe you'll give me a little preview.
I certainly will. Thanks so much, Bob. And as always, it's always fun to talk with you. Love you so much.
Yeah, I love you so much. I get the pleasure of seeing you after this is over. So, this is awesome.
That's right. All right. Thank you for chatting with me today.